Now that the best coaching candidate in many people's eyes in Ben Johnson is snatched up by the Bears, I figured, yeah, this would be a good time to do a video on coaches. That is obviously a bit sarcastic, as I should have done it before he signed. But regardless, here we are. I am going to do an analysis on the Bears at the end of the video, so stick around for that. But for every other team, I am going to do a deeper dive and look at the quarterback situation, the roster aside from the quarterback, the effective cap space, and the draft picks of each team. So there's going to be a couple variables. There's going to be four to be exact. And I think it pretty well encompasses what the situation of a team is. Obviously, it could be more inclusive and look at, this team has Jerry Jones as their owner and he sucks. So, yada, yada, yada. But I think that this is the most like tangible of things we can evaluate. So, it's what I'm going to look into. And speaking of Jerry Jones, he was on the forefront of my mind because he's going to be involved with the first team, the Cowboys, of course. As I mentioned, there's the four variables, and it's a 1 through 5 scale, one being the worst, five being the best. As for the Cowboys, at quarterback, I give them a 3 out of 5. I had them initially penciled in as a 4 out of 5 because Dak has shown that he is capable of very high end play. Just as recently as last year, he was arguably a top three quarterback. For me, I think he was the second best quarterback, and that's backed by stats. It's not just my opinion. But either way, being in the mix like that is very enticing for a new coach. But he's coming off an injury that sidelined him for the entire season. Well, not the entire season, but it ended his season, and he's getting up there a little bit in age. I wouldn't expect regression due to age at this point, but it is a little bit worrisome just because, there's the greater risk of re-injury as you get older. So that's a little bit worrisome. And also what's a bit worrisome is that he ranked in the past 2 years collectively for his average was 17th best in the league. That is with him being ranked as the second best quarterback last year. So he was pretty rough this year. And that's for a lot of reasons. The offensive line wasn't great. His weapons beyond CD Lamb are very lacking. There's no run game really. But that's what his results were. So that's a bit worrisome. And that gets me down to, a 3 out of 5. That's still good. But I just I couldn't bring myself to be confident in giving him a 4. Next, we have the roster, and this is where things heat up a little bit for the Cowboys because they definitely have holes. I'm not going to sit here and act like they don't, but they also have a lot of exciting players as well. Chiefly, you have Micah Parsons, who's one of the 5, I would say, best edge rushers in the league. Maybe even a little bit higher than that. It's so hard. There's so many good edge rushers. Then you also have CD Lamb, who had a down year this year as well, but he can't be that old. He's like maybe 27 at the latest. Let me check. He's 26. Okay. He'll be 27. Yeah. He is not going to be slowing down due to age, at least for a while. And that's a pretty good foundation right there alone. Then you have Tyler Smith, one of the best guards in the league. These are high-end players, and that's what I really look for. Oh, Deron Bland, one of the best corners in the league. Does that entice you a little bit? I think there's a lot to be excited for if you're a Cowboys fan because a lot of their talent is one exceptional, but two young as well. Bland, he's like maybe 25. I'll check on that as well. He's 26. Okay. There's there's a lot to like there. And they also have some intermediate players as well. You have Eric Kendricks, Osa Adigizua. Am I butchering that? No, it's, yeah, Adigizua. I confuse him with the Lions guy for some reason. Then you have Cooper Beebe. There's there's some foundation for sure. And I think the entire run defense is going to need analyzed because they brought in Mozzie Smith to be a game wrecker as a run defender chiefly, and they hoped that he could be a pass rusher as well. He hasn't been that. He's been very disappointing. He's been like PFF's one of the worst players according to their ratings. So that's not ideal. And with that said, they have, Kendricks at linebacker, but that's about it that I'd feel confident in. DeMarvin Overshown is somebody with potential. He's very athletic, but I don't think he's reached his potential to this point. So who knows what he's going to turn into. So, with all of this said, I give the Cowboys a 4 out of 5 for their roster. I would say to copy Fantano from like the music channel, he always says like, this is a soft 4 or a strong 6. I would say that the Cowboys have a moderate 4, as weird as that is to say. I think it's closer to being a soft 4 than it is a strong 4, meaning that like it's closer to a 3 than it is a 5. But even still, I think it's good enough to be labeled as a 4. So it's a pretty good roster for sure. I'm not going to lie and say that there's nothing wrong with it. There's definitely they need help in the run game on both sides of the ball, but they also have star talent all around the place. So with that said, they are doing pretty well to this point, except things get a little bit rough because effective cap space wise, they get a 1 out of a 5. They have no money. I think they're currently in the negative. I promise you, I looked thoroughly into the numbers, but now I'm forgetting a little bit who was where. But yeah, I believe that the Cowboys, they weren't like Saints level of in the red, but they have no money. So they get a 1 there. Draft pick wise, they get a 3 out of 5 because they have 8 picks. They don't really have any super juicy ones, but they're picking in good spots throughout the entire draft. So I'm going to give them a 3 there. So we tally this all together. They got a 3 for quarterback, a 4 for roster, a 1 for effective cap space, and a 3 for draft picks. That takes us to an 11. So that's a pretty good start. And next we have the Jaguars, who are very divisive, I would say, because they definitely have a fair bit of talent as well. But I think there's going to be a lot of people that are like, no, they underachieved this year, or they're going to say, no, they just suck. This team is terrible. So it's going to be very dependent on what you personally think of the Jaguars. But with that said, they start out decently strong with quarterback, where in the past 2 years, Trevor Lawrence has averaged out as the 18th best quarterback in the league for me, which isn't bad by any stretch. And I think he does still have potential to be better. I think if he gets better coaching, he'll be in a better position to succeed. As you know, you would imagine if you have better coaches, you're going to be at a better spot. But with that said, I think that it's reasonable to not want to bank on that either. So I was just kind of like splitting it down the middle. I wanted to be a little bit more positive than negative because I was thinking maybe a two, but I thought he's kind of in that Dak range. Dak has averaged, the 17th best quarterback in the past 2 years for me. Lawrence is the 18th best. If one's a three, I think the other should be a three also. And if anything, I feel a little bit more intrigued by Lawrence just because he's a bit younger and he has a bit more athletic abilities to him than Dak does. Like he just got a cannon for an arm. And that's something that, intrigues you. But yeah, I'm not going to be here and, acting like it's a guarantee that he turns into something. As for their roster, they are a little bit similar to the Cowboys. They're not like, let me explain that. They are not similar in their distribution of talent because the Cowboys can't stop the run, they can't run the ball. The Jaguars, they can stop the run and they can run the ball. So that's very different. But they kind of have, I love this term. When the Rams were really good with like Von Miller and Aaron Donald and Stafford that year, people were saying they have a stars and scrubs approach. And I tend to think that that's kind of how the Jaguars and Cowboys are. They're not as good, obviously, as what the Rams were with that philosophy, but they have some really good players, and then they have some like, that guy's a starter for you. I don't feel super good about that type of guys. So some of those guys, I would say the best player on this team as a whole is Josh Hines Allen. He is, I'd say, one of the 10 best edge rushers in the league. So he is fantastic. He's not quite up to Parsons level, but honestly, if Hines Allen gets up to Parsons level at some point in their careers, like if they overlap and, like one's fifth and one's sixth, I wouldn't be too surprised. Hines Allen is really, really good. And with that said, he is in a good spot because he's no longer like far and away their best player, as Brian Thomas Jr. had a sensational rookie year where he was one of the best rookies in recent memory for a wide receiver at least. He is absolutely fantastic. He is super athletically gifted. He's 6'4", he runs like a track star. He is really good hands, and he also has really good route running. There's basically nothing deficient with him. He's so silky smooth. I think it was Chris Sims that was super high on him before the draft, and he looks absolutely correct that the athletic ability he has is apparent in his route running. He has the catch radius with the 6'4" frame. He's great. So you have your stud on offense and defense. That's pretty good. And then from there, it gets a little bit rough. They have a good offensive tackle with Walker Little. He's not great. He's good as a pass protector. In addition to that, they also have Christian Kirk, who is a solid slot receiver. I would say he's probably ideally a number three. Like he would be a great number three, but he is a number two for them. So there is a little bit of not perfect fit, but Kirk is kind of their third. in the sense that Evan Ingram, their tight end, is good enough to be a like fringe number two. So they kind of have guys that are like in the right position, so to speak, but not entirely. If they could add another wide receiver, they would be in a very good position. But I don't think that's their biggest need. I think that they do need some help on the defensive side of the ball, particularly with their defensive backs. They don't have really anything to feel super confident in because Tyson Campbell is somebody that had a great sophomore year, and he's kind of just been whatever since. He's been dealing with injuries, so that's definitely part of it. But with that said, they do need some help at defensive back. They could use a safety, which you can get, late in the draft. Not late, but like in the middle part of the draft, I would say. And you can also find in free agency more than likely. So there's something there. Darnell Savage, he's he's a bit rough this year. He was PFF's 93rd coverage safety out of 96. That's pretty bad if you didn't know. And he had a good year the year prior. So there is potential there, but I'm not sure what he's going or how he's going to fit in to their plans moving forward. They also have some really strong linebackers. Devin Lloyd, really, really good player. He is super balanced. He doesn't pass rush much, but when he does, he's pretty good at it. And he is solid in coverage, really good as a run defender. He's overall, I think, I'd say one of the 10 best off ball linebackers. So that's good. And then Foyesade Oluokun is another player that is great to mesh off of Lloyd because Oluokun is not as good in the run game. He's a great tackler. He's just not, as strong to take on blocks as Lloyd is because I think they're both about the same size. I think they're both about like 235. But Oluokun is more fast and rangy and good in coverage. Lloyd is also good in coverage, but he specializes more in the run game. So they fit nicely together. Overall, I think that the Jaguars have some real talent to them. They definitely have some holes as well, though. So, with that said, I'm going to give them a strong 3. I think that if they round out their roster like any amount, they'll definitely be at least a 4. But right now, it's hard to feel as good in them as I do the Cowboys because they're both similar in that they have some real stars, but I like the stars for the Cowboys a little bit more. And I think that the Cowboys have a similar amount of like roster fulfillment. So that's why I think the Jags are a little bit lower. The Jaguars, they have about $25 million in cap space, and they're going to get a 2-4 effective cap space thereby. They have some options, but I wouldn't say that they're really, you know, swimming in the cash. And as for their draft picks, they have 8 or let me see. I think I'm tripping. No, they don't have 8. They have 10 draft picks. Jeez. That is really good. You start out with 7 if you didn't know. So yeah, 10 is exceptional, and I give them 4 out of 5 for that because they have all of their picks. I don't know if they actually have all their picks. They have a pick in every round, I believe. But with that said, they don't really have duplicate picks in an impressive way. Like they don't have, multiple seconds or, even better, multiple firsts. They're kind of just unnormally distributed picks. And then they have some extras at the end of the rounds. as well. So they have a good situation for draft picks for sure. They get a 4 out of 5, taking them to a 12 in total, as they have a really nice balance of quarterback roster, cap space, draft picks. Their lowest score was the cap space at 2, and their highest is the draft picks at 4. So they have 3 for a quarterback, 3 for roster, and the 2 for cap space, 4 for draft picks. That takes them to 12, and they are currently the lead for best team. And now we shift over to the Jets, who start out about as poorly as you can. They have Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback, and that's what they got for now, at least. He is not too hot, and he is just getting older. Unlike everybody else is getting younger, he's getting older. And I'm a bit worried about him because if they keep him, their team is just not going to be able to compete for anything. And if they get rid of him, they're going to be in some cap trouble, I believe. So there is not really a great solution to what they have. So as a result of that, I give them a 1 out of 5. Rodgers was my 27th ranked quarterback this year. I only looked at this year because I feel like with older players, it's a year by year basis. If they're starting to show their age, believe that. And I think Rodgers did to a good degree. So he was not helping the team in any meaningful way, but the team was helping him in some ways. The offensive line, I maintain, is good. They have Tyron Smith, who is definitely on the decline, but even still, he ranked as the 30th best offensive tackle for PFF out of, I believe, 81. So those are both pretty decent numbers. And they also have Olu Fashanu, who did pretty similarly. He was a little bit worse to start out his career, but by the end of it, I would say Fashanu was actually right there with Tyron Smith, and that is pretty good pretty good praise because Smith really has been good for a long time at this point, and Fashanu, he definitely has all the potential in the world. He is a smooth mover. He's about 320, so he's got the weight to handle power as well. I would say that he probably handles power a little bit worse than he handles finesse at this point, but he can handle both to some degree. They also have Morgan Moses. So they have 3 viable tackles. Then Elijah Vera Tucker is really good. John Simpson had a great year. He was 11th out of 75 guards per PFF. Joe Tippmann, he's a good center. So there's a lot of structure to the offensive line. And I think that there's a lot to like because they also have in place currently. It's not to say that this is going to last because it very well might not, but there are some weapons to go alongside the offensive line. Garrett Wilson, definitely a number 1 wide receiver. He is super talented and still has room to grow, I would say. There's nothing like specifically that I'm thinking he's deficient in, but he just could be a little bit more well-rounded, I would say. And, just developing refinement over time is going to be something that gets him to an even higher level of play than he currently is at, which is, if he stays at this level, he's still a number 1 receiver, like I said. Devontae Adams, he is I would say he's definitely liable to go. If Rodgers isn't their play at quarterback, I would say Adams is definitely going to be gone. And they need some holes covered for sure. In saying that, though, they again have the bones of a good team, as they have really good defensive back play, chiefly at cornerback. Sauce Gardner, I would still say, is a top 5 cornerback. I mean, I guess it's not really a hot take, but he has been great to this point. He had a down year this season, but there was a lot of dysfunction to the Jets as a whole. So I'm not too worried about it. Obviously, you want to see your players be good all the time, but it it is what it is. They also have Isaiah Oliver, who is one of the better nickel corners in the NFL. He has really come on strong late in his career. From 2018 through 2021, he was not a contributing factor. And from 2022 till now, he's been a very strong player. His worst PFF rank is 49th out of 127 in those 3 years. So he is a very capable player. They also have DJ Reed, I think is coming up on free agency, so it's interesting to see what's going to happen with him. I'm not sure if he's going to be back or not. It would be very nice if they could keep him, though, because I would still say it's probably the best corner trio in the league when everybody is together. DJ Reed is one of the premier number 2 options at corner, even though he's like 5'8". He's 5'9". So he is just a really valuable piece to have. He has been super consistent as well. I say this all the time. Defensive back is a finicky position. Year to year, you might suck. You might be great. Who knows? With DJ Reed, we could bet every single year that he would be really good, and you'd be right. His worst rank from 2018 through 2024. So that's 7 years, 6 years because he missed a year. He was 55th out of 93, so almost average. That is remarkable stuff. The next thing I want to talk about is this awesome defensive line that the Jets have going for them. They are pretty loaded, honestly, on the defensive side. Like, that's not really news, I wouldn't say, but it's kind of an update on things because I think people saw them play really poorly this past year and think, they just aren't good. But I think it was squarely just a down year for some guys and some coaching issues. And that was, the extent of it. Jermaine Johnson, he is really good. I don't know what his pressure numbers were for in 2023, but I do know that he was ranked as the 17th best edge rusher according to PFF. So he can be a really good contributor. He is good enough to lead the defense, and he's not even going to have to do that because Will McDonald is another edge rusher with some pass rushing prowess to him. Hassan Reddick, I'm a little bit skeptical on at this point. He didn't have a good year by any stretch, and he's 30, so he's not necessarily slowing down a lot, but his game is really predicated on speed, and he might be losing a little bit of a step, which could be to blame for his really bad year. So that's something to watch. But then on the inside, they have Quinnen Williams, one of the better defensive tackles in the league. From 2022 to 2023, so the 2-year sample, he was about as good as any defensive tackle in the past couple years. He can get it done as a run defender. He's a little bit better, I would say, as a pass rusher than a run defender, but he's more than capable as a run defender as well. So there's definitely some things to like. And if the team wants to compete now, CJ Mosley, a really good linebacker, one of the more high end balanced linebackers in the league. And then they also have Quincy Williams, the brother of Quinnen Williams. Quincy is pretty good too. He is really athletic. He's a bit undersized. I think he's like 5'11, maybe 6 foot, but he's also a little bit undersized in that he's like, I would say sub 230. I don't know exactly what, but he is a little bit undersized, that is to say. Even still, though, he can shoot gaps pretty well in the run game, and he is capable of using his athletic abilities in coverage. So, all around, he's a good player. I like him quite a bit. That's the main building blocks of the defense. You have all right safeties. Chuck Clark didn't have a good year this year, so you might want to move on from him, but it's going to be hard to move off of guys. They do have some money, but it's just you're going to want to spend it in more efficient ways probably than replacing a safety. So that's what their roster is looking like. Overall, I give them a 4 out of 5 for their roster. I think it's quite good. There's really a lot to like on both sides of the ball. You can feel like there's something to build off of on both sides, and that's really what you want more than anything else as an incoming coach. Obviously, it's going to be really preferred if you can just have a perfect team right off the get-go and not have to make any adjustments, but that's typically not going to be the case. You're typically going to jump into something that is a little bit, wonky, and then you're going to have to fill in some spots on your own, get your own guys. So next we have their effective cap space, where they get a 2 out of 5. They do have 15 million to work with, but that's not a whole lot of money. It's obviously better than being like in the negative, or you know, it's still like enough to get you at least a good player or a couple rotational guys. It's just that mixed with the fact that they have some pretty real holes on their roster. I know I was just praising their roster, but there's still stuff that needs done. That's not ideal. So they get a 2 out of 5. And then for draft picks, they get a 3 out of 5. They have 8 draft picks, so that is more than the normal. And there's nothing really too special about it, I wouldn't say. I I didn't list the rounds of the picks. I listed the value of them on the Brad Spielberger, and I forget the other guy who did it. I'm sorry about that. Spielberger, though, he did a updated version of the Jimmy Johnson trade chart for draft picks. So like what the value of number 1 is versus, number 10, say. So I just have what their values are, and I have a system that is in place to say that, this amount of points is worth a 5, this is worth a 3, whatever. So having 8 picks, pretty good. They also have a top 10 pick, so that's also nice. And that'll do it for the Jets. In total, they have 10 points because they have a 1 for quarterback, 4 for the roster, 2 for effective cap space, and then 3 for draft picks. So you add that all together, that gives you a 10. So far, they're the worst team, but not by much. And there's definitely an allure to them. So yeah, I won't be talking down on them too much. I think they are a viable job if you are able to stick around for the long term as a coach, especially because once you get off Rodgers' money, which I think is in the next it's in the next like 2 years, I want to say, then you can really make some headway. You have a young defense. I guess it's a little bit iffy because then you're going to be paying like Sauce and Garrett Wilson, but either way, you have something of a foundation now. So no matter what, you're going to be in a reasonable spot. Next, for the Raiders, they get a 2 for quarterback, which is funny to think that they get a better grade than the Jets do, but they have something in their favor that the Jets don't. For the Raiders, they have worse quarterback performance by a little bit than the Jets do because in the past 2 years, they average as the 30th best quarterback in Gardner Minshew. I don't know what Aiden O'Connell would do. He was like basically the same as Minshew. It was pretty funny, actually. They were like overlapping in some stats. But we'll say that it's Minshew. He's getting paid more. He's, I think, played a little bit better. Not by much, but a little bit better. And he is, the 30th best quarterback, let's say. That is worse than Rodgers being the 27th, but they are able to move off the quarterback money a lot easier than the Jets are, and they're also not invested in Minshew or O'Connell like the Jets are. So there's definitely some stuff that makes me think the Raiders' quarterback situation is better than the Jets. It's still not a great situation by any stretch. You're the 30th best quarterback out of like roughly 40. And that's, still, I guess it's a little better than I initially thought, 30 out of 40, but 40, they got a lot of backups in there. So the Raiders get a 2 for quarterback. Then for their roster, yikes. I don't love it, as you could imagine. There is, I think, more talent to build off of in the weapons department than we're used to seeing, though. Because aside from CeeDee Lamb for the Cowboys and Garrett Wilson for the Jets, I guess also Brian Thompson. Okay, never mind. There's weapons for every team, but the Raiders have one of the better ones with Brock Bowers. I would say Bowers is the second best tight end in the league, just behind Kittle. As soon as this upcoming season, though, I could see a world in which Bowers is the number one guy, and I could see him being the number one guy by like a decent margin. So that is to say that the Raiders have a pretty legit tight end situation. And then they also have Jacoby Myers as a converted slot receiver that plays outside, and he plays outside like about as well as he did in the slot. It's kind of a wild thing. Like, it's just a lot easier to play in the slot because you're not getting jammed at the line of scrimmage as much. And you also have more field to work with. You can do like, an in cut or an out cut and just make like a 5-yard gain that way. You generally can't do that with the outside positioning at like X or Z. So that is impressive for Myers. So they have a good number 1, number 2. They are one of the few teams that are set at 1 and 2. The Cowboys, they got CeeDee Lamb. Then you get a little iffy. Brian Thomas, he's a 1. Then you get Christian Kirk, who's like a 3. Then it just kind of goes that way. Like, you got Devontae Adams, you got as the number 2, I should say, and Garrett Wilson as the number 1. But the thing is, you're not sure what Devontae Adams is going to be doing. So it's a bit tough for most teams, but the Raiders, they have their guys, and Myers, I think, is 27 years old, if that wasn't clear. So he is still, maybe he's 28. Let me check. He's 28. Okay. So that doesn't really change things much. You still got your guy for several years. And in Bowers, I think he's 22. Let me check. Yeah, he's 22. You have your guy for, you know, a very long time, hopefully. So that's really nice. The weapons, you add a third receiver in there. You actually have like one of the better trio of weapons in the league. Like, I'm not going to say it's top 10, but like you get an above average trio. Right now, honestly, you could argue it's like, I don't know, maybe the 15th best, 16th best. So that's because Bowers is just that good. Like I know I'm like obsessing over him, but we all should a little bit. He's really, really good. And their offensive line is honestly kind of all right. They have a lot of youth involved as well, which is, I'm going to be honest, I haven't been paying super attention to all the moves that the Raiders have made, but it seems like what they're doing on the offensive line is kind of connecting. Colton Miller, I do remember that move. He was drafted a long time ago. Not like, 20 years ago, but a while ago. And he has turned into an absolute just gladiator of an offensive tackle. He is very good. I remember I didn't know very much about football at the time, but I was not like super in love with the pick of him. And lo and behold, like, the first 2 years, let's say, he is not particularly good. And I'm like, yeah, taking victory laps, whatever. And then lo and behold, he's like one of the 10 best tackles in the league. So, yeah, I would say the Raiders actually won that battle. Jordan Meredith. I'm going to be honest, I had not heard of this guy until doing the analysis of this video. He looks like somebody that is like just deceptively good. He has been in the league since 2021, and 2024 was his first year of playing. He is PFF's sixth ranked guard out of 75. So good on him. That's really good. Then Austin Powers Johnson, or Jackson Powers Johnson. Who am I talking about? I don't know who Austin. I don't know. Don't worry about it. Jackson Powers Johnson. He is a rookie. I think he was naturally a center. I don't know what he did at Oregon the entire time, but I think he was drafted as a center, but it looks like he played some, or I think he played some guard. It doesn't look like it, I'm imagining. But I think he played some guard this year as well. So he is versatile in that sense. I I feel like I should know who their natural center or like their original center is, but I cannot think of it. But either way, Jackson Powers Johnson had a good rookie year, it looks like. I heard people were a little bit disappointed with him, and I thought that he like was having a rough year. Looking at his stats, he was 40th. Okay, yeah, it lists him as a guard in PFF. He was the 40th ranked guard out of 75. That's not bad. A rookie guard? Are you kidding? He's 22 as well. No way. That's a dang good year. Most rookie offensive linemen, they suck. So, yeah, I'll take that any day. They also have, I feel like I'm really going over their offensive line really well here. Not well as in like I'm doing it in a good fashion, not never that. No. I just mean like I'm really getting into the weeds a little bit. Either way, Dylan Parham is another young. Geez, I wonder what their average age of their offensive line is. Colton Miller is like far and away their oldest guy. Parham, whatever it is, he is the 17th ranked guard out of 75. That is fantastic. He's 25 years old. My goodness. DJ Glaze, he's like 21, 22. Yeah, 22. He is another guy to build off of. He's a big dude. I didn't realize how big he is. 330. Jeez. This line, they got some talent to it, really. Like, this could be one of the better lines, in my opinion. Like, I might be getting a little carried away, but in my opinion, it could be one of the better lines in the league in a couple years when everybody hits their full potential. And, like, yeah, by the time everybody, like, say DJ Glaze, he's going to be at his best, like, at 25, let's say. Then Colton Miller might be a little bit on the decline, but I think that what you're getting in Glaze being better is worth what you're losing in Miller, because Miller's still going to be good when, Glaze is in his prime. So there is some real stuff to like there. They got a better offense than I actually realized, because I looked at their entire roster the night before doing the video, but I just like skimmed through it. I didn't really take in anything, and yeah, it kind of impresses me actually what they have to build off of. So defensively though, this is where things get a little yucky. They have Max Crosby, one of the let's be conservative. Let's say one of the 10 best edge rushers. I would say he's in years past, he's been one of the 5 best for sure. This year, he didn't have a very good year this year. He still played like every single down of play, which is something that is commendable, I find. But yeah, he didn't have the same impact that he normally does. I don't know if it was, I'll be honest, I don't know if he was like playing injured or if he just wasn't having as good of a year, if it's a scheme thing. I don't know what the situation was, but he definitely wasn't as productive as he's been in years past. So I'm a little bit nervous about him, which again, maybe I shouldn't be. Maybe he was just hurt and he was playing through it, and that's, actually nothing. So who knows? Then the next best guy I would say on their defense, there's 3 guys that are like right there with each other. I would say Trayvon Morig is the guy that if I like had to put money on, I would say is going to be their second best guy. And then third best, I would say, is Tyree Wilson. Let me actually really quickly say Morig is apparently the opposite of what I thought he was going to be. I thought he was mainly a uh, zone cover type of safety, but it turns out PFF is grading him much more highly for his run defense. So maybe I just had it backwards, or maybe he's changed his game. He's just been like, no, let me get my attribute points all different. So he's a unique player in that sense. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I shouldn't think he's going to be their second best guy. But I mean, either way, the 3 guys I'm mentioning are all super close. Like I can't. And they all 3 play different positions, so it's hard to evaluate. The next player that I would put my hopes into is Tyree Wilson. I think if you are talking potential, Wilson is the highest potential on their team. Like, full stop. Or, like, defensively, I should say. Because Brock Bowers, I think, is pretty handedly their number one guy in that sense. Because he could be, like, again, I'm hyping him up, but, like, he could be one of the better tight ends of all time if he, really hits the ground. Or, like, he just keep moving forward, because he's already hit the ground running. And he Wilson, that is. Wilson, though, he could be I think he could be better than Max Crosby. I don't think there's a likelihood of that. Like, I would say it's in the, you know, couple percent because Wilson is an athletic freak, but he's getting a little bit up there for like a developmental player, if that makes sense. He's only 25, but at 25, I would say you're kind of starting to hit your stride a bit. And don't get me wrong, he massively improved from 2023 until this past year. He was just much better at, I would say, every aspect of the game. With that said, he also does have a ton of potential just to be, an athletic beast because he's, oh my gosh, I love seeing these numbers. 6'6", so he's huge. And then 275 for weight. That is also huge. He is a big boy. I would not like to go up against that. There's no NFL player that I would like to go up against, but like especially a dude that's 275, 6'6". So Wilson, he's also like really fast, really strong, all that. He's got all the athletic ability in the world. It's just it's there's a lot of players that have had all the athletic traits you want and just never actually hit their potential. So I'm a little bit skeptical of him, but even still, I'd put him as their second guy. And then Robert Spillane has had really good years. I think it's 2 years now. Maybe it's 3. But really good years with the Raiders. He is one of the best run stuffers in the league, which is crazy because he's 230 pounds. I know that he's 230 pounds, but I continually think he's like 245 just because him standing up Derrick Henry when he was a Steeler, when Spillane was a Steeler, that is. Henry wasn't a sneaky secret agent Steeler at any point. But Spillane, he can really make some tackles. And I don't think he's a good coverage player, but like you can hide that a little bit if you have a good coverage player to go with him, which they do not. Divine Diablo is below average as a coverage guy, kind of bad against the run as well. He's a little bit undersized too. He's 223. I would like to see maybe a little bit more beef just for guys to take on blocks. So that's kind of hard to find though. A guy that's big and can play in coverage well. Anyways, that's about it. Their defensive backs are all bad, and aside from Morig, who's pretty decent. So there's a lot of issues on their defense. If you get Wilson and Crosby going, they also have, I want to say they have another edge rusher, but I don't see him on their depth chart. Give me a second. I want to say he's also rather young, like Wilson. So, yeah, that is to say that, Christian Wilkins, he's not young, but he wasn't on the lineup because he's hurt. Christian Wilkins is a really good defensive tackle. So they got some things going for them, actually. And I do like that. Oh, Malcolm Kuntz is who I was thinking of. Is he any good? Yeah, he looks like he's got some pretty good stats. He is somebody that I would be intrigued by to see what he can do down the line. He's 27 years old, so he's like not perfectly fitting the rebuild, but still, if you're good, you're good. So, yeah, the Raiders, they have some things to like, and then my goodness, there is a lot to not like. So, with that said, I feel like I'm gonna be like a snake for this, but I'm going to give them a 2 out of 5. I know I was like super hype about their roster in a lot of places. And don't get me wrong, I am. But as it stands now, I just think there are a lot of holes. And like I was specifically looking at things that I like. They don't necessarily need, but they have a hole at 2 wide receivers, running back, 4 of their 5 defensive backs, one of their defensive tackles, a linebacker. I didn't keep track. Maybe you counted. That's a lot of holes. And just mind you, that's the 2 out of 5. That's to say, right this instant, they are a 2 out of 5. They could very easily be improved moving forward because they have a boatload of money. How much money do they have exactly, you might ask? 86 million. You know, that's pretty good. And that is going to come in mighty handy when we're talking about the the spots that need filled. And I think that they're going to do a mix, I would imagine, of probably looking at, this guy is a star level player, let's bring him in to establish like a foundation. Or they're also going to do, or not or the and they're also going to do a mindful investment as well, and say that, let's bring in this guy, he can play at an all right level, and this guy, he's good, whatever. So I think that that's the right approach. You can't just do one or the other, I wouldn't say. Just bring in stars or just fill out your roster, because if you fill out your roster, that's good. You have a competitive team, but there's not really an upside to it. And if you get stars, you get a little bit top heavy and you don't actually have a well rounded roster. So I think you need to do a little bit of both. And the Raiders, they get a 5 out of 5 for their effective cap space. You're not going to find much more than the 86 million they have. And with that said, for draft picks now, they kind of have the standard distribution of picks. They have 8 picks, and I think they have a double third, or maybe it's a 2 seconds. I think it's 2/3. And then it kind of just balances out after that. Like they have the 1/4, 1/5, whatever. I think it's just pretty par for the course. The numbers back that as well for their value of picks based on the Spielberger draft chart. So, with that said, they get a 3 out of 5. It's nothing special, I wouldn't say. They get a little bit better, maybe, than some of the teams that are right there with them, but it's not really moving the needle for me. So, with that said, the Raiders get a 2 for quarterback, a 2 for roster, a 5 for effective cap space, and then a 3 for draft picks, taking their total up to 12, meaning they're tied for first, also tied for second if you want to be a little more pessimistic. So that's pretty good. And finally, we get to the Saints, who are a very interesting team for sure. At quarterback, we're going to start off as we did for all of them, so you could probably imagine. They have the 16th ranked quarterback when doing my quarterback stat for this year and last year. Carr is basically dead average, and I think that checks out. He thereby gives them 3 points, and that'll be the start to their evaluation. As for their roster, they kind of secretly have a really good offensive line. That's if everybody's healthy, because Ryan Ramczyk didn't play at all this year to my knowledge, and he is the big piece of this puzzle. Ramczyk, one of the better offensive tackles in the league, and then the other tackle, Talise Fuaga, he had a pretty good year. He wasn't good in pass pro, which I think was a little bit to be expected. He projected more of like a mauling run blocker type than he did as a pass protector. And then what really gets hot is Eric McCoy was one of the best centers in the league this year. If he continued his level of play for the entire year, because he missed a lot of the season, he could have been an all-pro level player. Then at guard, they have Cesar Ruiz, who is a late bloomer. He was not really doing much for the early parts of his career and has turned out to be a pretty solid guard. I think he started as a center. And then it's Lucas Patrick. I wanted to call him Tim Patrick. I don't know who Tim Patrick is, or is Tim Patrick the Broncos receiver maybe? Either way, the Saints have a decent guard in Lucas Patrick. I would say he's right about average. And you could do a lot worse than average for an offensive lineman. Then the meat and potatoes for the offense, aside from the offensive line that again could be very good assuming people are healthy, is Chris Olave. Honestly, if you had to factor in age for receivers as well, he's one of like the top 10, I would say, because there's obviously like the Nico Collins and the Jamar Chase, where like even though they're maybe a little bit older, I think they are. I don't know how Collins is, to be honest. They're just a good bit better, so you would take them ahead of Olave. And then there's the guys like Brian Thomas who like might not be as good as Olave. I would say it's pretty close, but Thomas is younger. You would take Thomas. For the most part, though, there's like few players that are as good or like as good roughly and his age. So that's a pretty good asset to have. They also have Rashid Shaheed, who is one of the better deep threats, and Alvin Kamara. He's definitely getting up there. Not for like a normal person, but for a running back. Yeah, he's 29 years old. I don't know what his long-term future prospects are going to be. He still played well this year, but it's just a little bit nerve-wracking because it's like, oh, is this going to be the year he falls off a cliff or, just gets hurt, unfortunately. It's a little bit scary with him. They definitely have some stuff to like on the offensive side of the ball. You don't like Marquez Valdez-Scantling being your number 3, I guess. But really, that's the only thing that's like not good. And then defensively, the trade of Marshawn Lattimore definitely switched things up a bit on them. I was super high on Kool-Aid McKinstry, mainly just because I love his name. He definitely could be the corner of the future for them. Someone who I would say could not is Alontae Taylor, because in 3 years, his best PFF rank is 103rd out of 118. That's rough. And then Paulson Adebo, he's pretty good. I think he was at his best 2 years ago, or in 2023. That took me forever to calculate. But yeah, 2023 was his best year. He was 15th ranked out of 127 per PFF for corners. So he definitely has some high end potential to him. I think he's also like an athletic freak, if I remember correctly. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else. But he is definitely someone with high potential, no matter what. Chase Young, he was like top 10 in pressures, I want to say. PFF doesn't like him as a grade because they have him like around average, but I think he was is secretly like top 10 in pressures, as I mentioned. So he could be somebody that, you know, is worth watching for. The only thing is I don't think he's on the long-term contract and they don't have any money. So that might not actually be the case. Carl Granderson, though, he was also pretty good this year. He's more of a run defender, I would say, than a pass rusher. He is the prototypical edge rusher for the Saints. He's a big boy at 6'5", 260. I think, to be fair, though, Chase Young is also pretty similar to those proportions. Yeah, 6'5", 265. Okay. So there are definitely some big edge setters out there. Then they have a good linebacker duo. Demario Davis, a very solid player, even though he's 48. And he has Pete Werner as his teammate. And Werner is also good. He, I think, is going to benefit from all the time that he's had with Davis, because I think Davis is just like a walking coach, which like I think most coaches do walk. So that's not necessarily a unique praise for him, but I meant like walking encyclopedia, but I butchered it. Either way, the safeties, I would say, are pretty not great. Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, he's got to be like 34 at this point. Let me check. Oh, no, 33. Pretty close, though. He is someone that you got to watch for being on the decline as well, because he just came off of his worst year as a pro. And you're 33, that's a little bit So that's something to watch out for. Then they have Will Harris, who I just flat out don't think is very good. There's not really much to it towards that. Let me see what his PFF grades are. His best grade as a safety was 58, or no, I think this was actually better. 64 out of 118. So he was still below average, or like, yeah. And that's his best year. That's not really something that brings in a lot of hope. Then for the negatives, as I mentioned, Alontae Taylor, really rough. Brian Brzee, he has been a disaster. He was like super athletic and seemed like, he could be a nice defensive tackle. No, not yet, at least. So maybe he just doesn't have it, but maybe he's going to take a while. I don't know. I wouldn't bank on it either way, because 2 really bad years in a row is something that keeps you up at night. And then they don't really have another defensive tackle either. I think Cam Jordan is probably playing defensive tackle the most for them, even though he's like an edge rusher hybrid. I don't know if they necessarily have a defensive tackle too. because I just like that's how bad their defensive tackle situation is that they just don't really have. I guess Kalen Saunders might be their defensive tackle too. He's pretty bad, but not the worst. So all of that is to say, there's there's some talent on the Saints. They don't have really that like star foundational building piece aside from with Olave and possibly on the offensive line, like a couple guys. That's that's not ideal. I mean, they're kind of like the inverse of the Raiders in a sense because the Raiders didn't have any like they just didn't have very many pieces, I should say. But they had stars. The Saints, they have a good amount of pieces. They have like, several guys that are average or above average, but they don't have anybody that you're like, yeah, this guy's going to be our captain for 10 years, really. Which Kool-Aid could be that, perhaps. But I just I'm not going to bet on anything until I see it, really. So, all of that is to say, the Saints get a 2 out of 5 for their roster, so it's the same as the Raiders because I think that the supporting pieces around are kind of similar. Like I think Olave and Bowers are like I would rather have Bowers to be honest. I know I talked highly of Olave as well, but like give me Bowers. I think that he's got that super high end potential that's just like kind of blows you away. Olave, I think, is just going to be really, really good. Which, like, I wouldn't turn that down any day of the week, but that's just where my head is at. Then, for the effective cap space, the Saints have, get this, negative 58 million in effective cap space. I said effective cap space twice, now 3 times. That's not what you want to see, especially when your roster needs a lot of help. So, I don't even really know what you can say about that one. That's just rough. They get a 1 out of 5 for that one. That's the worst you're going to see. And lastly, for the draft picks, the Saints get a 3 out of 5 because they have again a mediocre situation. They have 8 draft picks, one of which is an extra. I mean, obviously it's an extra in one of the rounds, but I think it's like a decent extra, meaning like an extra third. I can't exactly remember, but they have 8 draft picks. They have top 10 picks, and that's something to go off of. But man, that minus 58 million really just not good. So for their score, they get a 3 for quarterback, a 2 for roster, a 1 for effective cap space, and a 3 for draft picks, taking their score to a 9. So they are the worst opening, in my opinion. I think that's about right. Like I don't see that job and think to myself, oh geez, that'd be the dream job. I wouldn't turn it down. Like give me millions of dollars to suck as a coach. That sounds like a good gig. But that is just that's rough with the negative 58 million. So with that said, I guess I spoiled it. We didn't go over the Bears part yet. The Bears, I'll just kind of quickly go through their ratings. They get a 3 for quarterback, which I think is just about right for Caleb Williams. I wanted to give them a 4 just because I think he was the number 1 overall pick for a reason. And I think that he showed promise throughout the year, mainly in the early part. I think he kind of died down a little bit towards the end, but he's shown some things. He's also shown a propensity, though, to hold on to the ball forever. So that's not ideal. And with that said, I think with the right coaching And also better skill position players because Keenan Allen wasn't playing well. Rome Odunze had a rough rookie year. Even DJ Moore, I wouldn't say was overly good. I know that could partly be just from not having the greatest quarterback play, but I didn't think he was as sensational as I remember. So I think that he could be better. So there's no doubt in my mind, like Caleb Williams could be one of the better quarterbacks in the league still. He had a rough year. He was My quarterback metric had him as 32nd out of 40 quarterbacks. So that was not good. But with that said, I can still see a world in which he ends up being really solid because he's got that athletic ability, he's got the natural playmaking stuff. He's got some things working in his favor. Roster wise, this is where I got a little bit giddy with it. I gave them a 5 out of 5. I I really like their roster. Like I think don't make me put a number on it, but I think it's like one of the better rosters, agnostic of quarterback in the entire league. They have I will I will argue for this one that they have a good offensive line. At least for in pass protection, which sounds so backwards because they allow a million sacks a game. But that's mostly because Caleb and Justin Fields in years past have held onto the ball for so long. I don't remember exactly who ranked where, but Caleb was like definitely, I want to say, top 5 in longest time to throw. And, part of that is him making plays. Yeah, that's not like the worst, but part of that is also him not processing as quickly as he should be. So that holds back the offensive line quite a bit. They have good grades in PFF pass blocking and also with like individual players as well. So I think their offensive line is fine. Wide receiver wise, DJ Moore, I know he had a bad outing this year. I would still, take him. I think he's a number one still. Like I definitely has me a bit worried that he had such a rough year this season, but I would still feel pretty confident in him. Rome Odunze, there was a reason he was drafted as highly as he was. He was well thought of by the rest of the league. That's the main stuff that I think is worth noting on the offense. Defensively, man, there's a lot to like there as well. You got Jalen Johnson, Jaquan Brisker, I'm trying to think, Montez Sweat. Um, I would say those are the three foundational building blocks. Maybe I'm missing somebody. It kind of feels like I am, but it also kind of feels like I'm not. If I am, it's probably going to occur to me right as I finish uploading the video, and then I'm going to feel real dumb. But either way, those are like, the premier guys for sure on the team. So that's a lot to build upon. And Gervin Dexter, I think it is, the defensive tackle. He is also good. Whatever their best defensive tackle is, I think it's Dexter. He is another guy that I would feel excited about because I think it was his rookie year this year. Maybe it was his second year. Maybe it was his 8th year. Who knows? But yeah, they got a good roster, and then they got a fair amount of cap space. I gave them a 4 for that one. It was between like I want to say it's 55 million. I want to say it was at least like roughly in that area, and that's pretty huge because like they have minimal spots that need filled. So like you can definitely go out and sign a pretty nice player. You just completely fill out the roster. So that's a good thing to have. And then draft picks, I gave them a 3. They, like everybody else, had 8 picks. I guess everybody else had that many or more. So they had 8 picks, or they have 8 picks, and I think they have an extra 2, and then I forget what beyond that. But with that said, that is a nice job. Like, that would actually be my, dream job to just be like, "Yeah, let me sign up for the job where I get a high draft pick, a and multiple picks for some rounds, some money to work with for signing players, a great roster, and then a very talented quarterback." Like, yeah, I would be pretty jazzed about that one. So, all of that is to say, I gave the Bears a 15. That means the Bears were number 1, the Jaguars were number 2, as were the Raiders with 12 each. The Cowboys were 4th at 11, the Jets were 5th at 10, and then the Saints were 6th at 9. So that's how things ended up shaking out. And those are my thoughts. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section. And also be sure to like and subscribe for more football content.